I think one of the things I found most surprising when I was researching this book was the number of people, the everyday people, who ended up with a criminal record at the end of the war. The reason for this is that a lot of them had done very simple things. They'd made mistakes, and there was a lot of extra legislation brought in throughout the war that covered just so many different things. And the thing that comes to mind most often when I think about this is the blackout. The blackout was strictly enforced, and okay, you would probably get away with it once or twice, but if you were a serial offender, you let that chink of light through, then you were up before the magistrates, and you were in court, and you were fined, and you found yourself in the newspapers. The stigma was huge. In the book, there is one particular lady who I think had something like 6 times in court. She said to the magistrate at one particular time that she could not physically get around her entire house before it got dark, because she had something like 32 windows. She obviously had a very big house, and she was running around. She had 6 or 7 kids to look after, and it was just impossible. And it's ladies and gentlemen like that who found themselves at the wrong end of the law, and who unfortunately have ended up in a book like this, and that's a real shame. Researching this book was quite challenging in many respects. There is just so much to say about what happened during the war. It's very easy to get bogged down, to drown in the welter of information. Some of the information is readily available. You can go to the National Archives, or you can go to the British Library and read up about it, or you can look through old newspapers, that kind of thing. But there's also the other side of the coin, where there was a lot of censorship. They did not print news that would bring morale down. That was quite hard, because I found that there were things I knew had happened, but finding the information about it, finding references about it, very difficult, very difficult. Well, now the book is out. I have to tell the world that I love this book. I am biased, I do know that. I've never had a book with gold leaf on the front. I mean, this is lovely. I've never had a book like that. I think that an awful lot has been done to make this book look really good. And as I say, I am biased, so I did write it. But it's lovely when a publisher takes a lot of effort to make a book look good. When I first had this sent to me, my very first look at the book, yes, I'd seen the page proofs and the PDFs and whatnot, which didn't show the lovely gold leaf on the front. PDFs and gold leaf don't go together. But when I actually held it in my hands for that very first time, and I looked at it and I saw it for the very first time, oh God, that was good. I mean, it really was fabulous. And the fact that my publisher had sent the first advance copy to me, all wrapped in tissue paper, was just an added bonus, because it showed that Sabrestorm, which is the publisher, valued it as much as I do, and that's really nice. While I was researching this book, I kept coming across American stories to go into the book, which is one reason why we've got the American flag on the front cover. A lot of American servicemen came over to Britain on their way through to Europe and the rest of the world. And a lot of these guys had never been out of America. They'd never been outside, some of them outside their home state. All of a sudden they were in this big wide world that they weren't prepared for. And for some of them, sadly, there was a lot that they weren't prepared for. And this led to all kinds of crimes, from rape, murder, through to things like pickpocketing and bits and bobs like that. But I'm not suggesting in any way that the American servicemen were any worse than any others. It's just that whilst I was researching crimes in Britain, I kept coming across American service crime. It was a problem to the extent that the British government allowed the American government to take over a wing of Shepton Mallet prison, which is in the West Country, and one of the oldest prisons in the country. Sadly, only just closed down, which is a real shame. But they opened a separate gallows section in that wing. They actually built their own gallows, and they executed American servicemen there. So what's in it? I bet that's what you're asking. What's in it? Well, shall we have a look? Obviously, really good front cover. The foreword, I was tremendously privileged to have the foreword written by Michael O'Brien, who it was the Chief Constable of Bedfordshire Police. He is a personal friend of mine, and when he heard that I was doing this book, he was tremendously helpful, and I had absolutely no hesitation in asking him if he would write the foreword, but I did so with my fingers firmly crossed, and I hoped, and bless him, thank you Michael. It's lovely what he's written in here. So then we have an introduction. As you can see, there's a few photographs. Basically, the introduction just sets the scene. It tells you that there was crime, the kinds of crime, and the kind of Britain that overseas servicemen found when they came here, because you know, you can imagine America, huge place, coming to a little quaint place with lots of history that America doesn't have. It was quite something. And then we go into looting. The enemy at home, I've called that, because it was very widespread. It was shocking in many respects. When you get wholesale looting, I mean, the case of Dover, for example, a lot of households were evacuated from Dover because they were so close to the Channel, and a lot of people, when they came back to their homes, found that the only thing that was in their home were the curtains. Everything, including stair rods and mangles and everything, had been stripped out. And it was wholesale looting. Organised gangs had come down with liveried removal trucks, and you know, locals that were still there thought that it was a bona fide removal rather than a stripping of a house. So that's looting. As you can see, there's quite a lot going on there. And then we move on to the black market, the home of the Spiv, bless them. What can I say about the black market? When something is rationed, it creates want. And it isn't the same as need. You can need it and you can want it. And if you want it and you've got the money to pay for it, then you can get it. And on the black market, people, you know, it's wholesale stealing. The theft of all kinds of things, from ration books to ammunition to guns to butter. You know, all kinds of things happened. So this book, this section goes into that. You've got things like ration books, and a lovely picture here that I was sent. A lady actually in a shop, and the gentleman there, bless him, he's having to tot up all the points and whatnot for what she's buying. It must have taken forever for the shopkeepers to do that. Digging for Victory, more ration books. There was a lot going on. It's a big section. And then, of course, you can't not mention the blackout. A heaven-sent opportunity, frankly, for criminals. If you want to get into a property and burgle it, well, hey, just wait for the blackout to fall. The entire neighbourhood, not just the place, is in darkness. You can tiptoe in, you can help yourself, you can tiptoe out, and nobody will see you. Perfect. But it's not just things like burglary. Sadly, there was predators around, people like Gordon Cummings, the Blackout Ripper. He did exactly what his name implies. He was an RAF serviceman, and he was a nasty person, and several women lost their lives in the blackout because of him. Then I have a look at murder, not just in the blackout, but generally. And one of the particular things that struck me was the murder of a gentleman called Ralph Binney. Captain Binney was a war hero from the First World War, and he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was shopping, just walking the streets basically in London, having a look at the shops, and organised crime decided that they would come along and do a smash and grab at the jewellers just up the road. They made a getaway in their car, and bless him, he stepped out in front of them thinking that if he said stop, they would stop. Of course they didn't. They ran him over. They were then hemmed in by all the passers-by. This was, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. There were a lot of people around. They found that they couldn't get through in their car, and so they reversing over Captain Binney again. They then found that they couldn't reverse all the way through, so they went forward again, over Captain Binney again. And this time his clothes caught underneath the car, and he was dragged for over a mile. Witnesses say, they heard him screaming. Of course he died, bless him. The one good thing, if you can think of that as being good, is that the Binney Awards for Bravery came out of that particular episode. A very sad episode. The driver of the car, he was originally sentenced to death, and at the last moment, I think about 4 days before his execution, his death sentence was commuted, and I think something like 9 years he served in the end. That leniency, it's been argued, was one of the main reasons for the rise in crime that happened after the war, gang crime. So that's the murder section. And then what do I look at next? What comes after that? Let's have a look. I've got a section on odd things, lots of different bits that don't really fit into one chapter. I've called it fraud, theft, hooch and other crimes. Things like white collar crime. As I said in one of my other videos for this book, some people didn't set out to become criminals. They found themselves in that situation, and one of the things that comes to mind to tell you about in this is insurance fraud. The method of people using insurance as a means to gain money, basically. The people who would repeatedly claim for the same house that had been bombed, or would claim for a house that wasn't theirs. That was a very popular one. Or would overinflate the cost of repairs, a business, for example. So some of this was premeditated, some was accidental, I'm sure. I'm perhaps being generous, but white collar crime was big. So what else is in the book? Well, one of the things that tickled me slightly when I was at the National Archives researching this was a prosecution for taking obscene photographs. Now, the kind of thing that we're talking about would be, frankly commonplace in this day and age in the 21st century. But in the Second World War, this was quite a big thing. So I have a section in the book about this particular case. And let me read you. Somebody ordered for 6 shillings, a 6-shilling set of untouched anatomical studies, preferably assorted male and female, failing this, all female, age of model 20 to 21 years. So this is an order that somebody had received for obscene photographs. They were, of course, prosecuted, and they were, they had the whole lot confiscated. But the book, as you can see, touches on all kinds of different things. It's not just, the big things. It's not just murder and whatnot. So what else have we got here? Armed service crime. I've finished the book with armed service crime. There was a lot of it, sadly. Guys who found themselves in situations that they couldn't cope with. You got the mad, the bad, the sad. It happens all the time, but in a period of war, I think it's particularly shocking. This particular illustration is a Hawkins grenade. It was used by a young man to blow his father up. His father was in a bath chair. He was a First World War veteran, and he had found himself, in a position where, I think he was blown up actually originally, and he couldn't walk. His father was a particularly difficult man. He made life very difficult for the family, and his son, who was in the army, had been taught how to use these grenades. And so he adapted one, slid it under the bath chair, and when the nurse took his father out for a walk, it detonated. His father was killed. There's some pretty harrowing descriptions of where bits of his body were found. And the nurse, bless her cotton socks, she survived, but I think she lost a leg, something like that. I mean, she was very lucky to survive. Not nice, not nice. So there we are, there's the book. There's me at the end there. I hope that you like it. I hope that it does justice to the subject. I hope that you buy it, that would be nice, or that you read it from the library, but either way, enjoy it. Thank you.